And so it says for many months, President Ballard. So there's two options. Either President Ballard, it became clear, it says, to President Ballard that he had betrayed their friendship at some point. Question is, when was that? If that was many months ago, when he realized that, he never told Tim. The church never did anything to say, like,
they never took the articles down.
They didn't take articles down. They didn't do anything, even though he had betrayed their friendship and that they needed to distance themselves from him, and they realized that he was unauthorizedly using it. Or number two is that he just became aware of it when he looked at the articles that Vice put in his face and was like, we don't have time to call Tim. We're just going to release this statement right now to get in front of this thing. Like, one of those two options are true. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's show. I'm Jacob Hansen, the host of Thoughtful Faith, and joining me today is my friend Luke Hansen, who spells Hansen wrong.
I don't spell it wrong. It was my parents, but it's not even spelled wrong. So, but yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm out on the road, so we're doing the phone camera thing, but I think it'll work.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, well, good for you. Well, hey, I wanted to bring you on today, and I myself wanted to just talk about this whole thing with Tim Ballard on my channel. I've kind of been commenting on it on social media and things, and people have seen that, but I kind of wanted to take the time to really lay out what I think about the whole thing, and also get your take on the situation, because I imagine you have some thoughts on it as well. So does that sound good?
For sure. Yes.
Cool.
Sounds
well,
great.
What I want to do first, just real quick for anyone who's not aware, who's been living under a rock, basically everybody knows, but the church, and this is my understanding of the way things played out. If it's not correct, people can correct me, but this is my understanding of what happened, is that Vice News dug into some, basically, well, let's do this. Last year, I think it was, the FBI or other people like investigated Tim Ballard's Underground Railroad organization to basically check to see if there was fraud and if, things were not on the up and up. And my understanding is that the result of that investigation was that they didn't find anything that broke the law, that he essentially, they were fine. However, they produced 10,000 pages of documents, and Vice News, knowing that there was a high chance of Tim Ballard running to replace Mitt Romney in Utah, decided to go and dig in to this paperwork to see if they could find any dirt on Tim Ballard. And so they found some stuff that they thought that they could put in their article in some way to kind of go after Tim Ballard, because Vice News hates Tim Ballard. And so my understanding is they reached out to the church and gave the church access to information. My guess is what they did is they sent the church over the drafts of what the articles are that they're going to be dropping. They have dropped, I think, 2 at least. They might drop more, but basically dropping information on the church and saying, like, hey, we have all this dirt on Tim Ballard. Y'all want to make a comment? And then the church responds, and they respond with this comment. And this is the part that was really shocking to people. And I'll just read it here. So it says, President Ballard and Tim Ballard, no relation, established a friendship a number of years ago. That friendship was built on shared interest in looking after God's children wherever they are and without regard to their circumstance. However, that relationship is in the past. For many months, President Ballard has had no contact with the founder of Operation Underground Railroad. The nature of that relationship was always in support of vulnerable children being abused, trafficked, and otherwise neglected. Once it became clear Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name for Tim Ballard's personal advantage and activity regarded as morally unacceptable, President Ballard withdrew his association. President Ballard never authorized his name or the name of the church to be used for Tim's personal or financial interests. In addition, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints never endorsed, supported, or represented Operation Underground Railroad, Tim Ballard, or any projects associated with them. President Ballard loves children all over the world. It has been his mission and life's work to look after them, care for them, and point them to their Savior. Okay. So that is the statement that was released by the church to Vice News. Now, Vice did not include initially a source on this. They just said a church spokesperson, so everyone was skeptical about it, including me. And then eventually the source came out that it was actually from the director of church media relations, like 15-year veteran. And so it's like, oh, and like guys like that don't just release statements on their own. Like, this is from the church. Like, there's no doubt that was a statement that came officially from the church, and that the media director they don't release statements like that without approval from probably at least an apostle. I would say maybe a couple of them. So this statement has been released, and it is extremely pointed, as we all just kind of heard. So real quick, that's sort of the situation. Everyone's been like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Now, in addition to this, Tim Ballard comes out, he rejects the claims, and then says it's all not true. And then now Vice releases another article that's alleging sexual misconduct allegations against him. People can read the articles, go into the details on that. Maybe we'll discuss those later. But that's and again, Tim is denying this and saying this is all like not true. And so now that's where it is, right? And so people are kind of shocked that the church came out with such a bold statement, calling Tim's behavior morally unacceptable, talking about betrayal. And Tim said, there's one thing that Tim is saying is he's saying, I haven't heard any of this. Like, this just came out of left field. Like, I wasn't called by the church, didn't talk to me, ask me about this. It was just like, boom. So anyway, that's sort of the situation. Anything I'm missing there? You want to add to that as far as just what happened?
I mean, there's so many details that you could add because this thing's getting pretty complicated. I think it might also be worth to note that the stake president and bishop of Tim Ballard also weren't aware of this before, which gets a little weird.
According to Tim, right?
Yes. According to Tim, which gets a little weird if we're calling something immoral behavior, all that kind of stuff, and it's not going through his priesthood leaders. So that's a concern that I have as well with this. But we should also mention that Ballard put out a second statement. So his first statement was in kind of a spontaneous video reaction that was about 10 minutes long. And then the second statement was from the organization that he's now with. I think it's called Spear. And it was an actual press release, written out statement that added a couple more details. For example, saying, I'm in good standing with the church. I'm always going to believe the church. Even if this was an actual thing that came down from, Elder Ballard himself, I'm still going to be committed to the church and to my mission to save children.
Okay.
So that is where we are at right now.
Yeah. So what's your take on it? I mean, there's a lot probably that you've been thinking about with this.
Yeah. So to explain, because everybody has biases coming into this, and my biases come from the BYU versus Duke volleyball scandal that happened about a year ago. So to brief people on that briefly, there was a player at a BYU volleyball game at about the start of the school year, a little over a year ago, who said she heard racist slurs from the crowd at this BYU home game, that she's black, the volleyball player, and came out and said that. Then it was like her mother and godmother were starting to say that it was the N-word, that it was yelled repeatedly, that they told BYU about it and nothing happened. So what happens after that? Well, BYU kind of freaks out. They put out a press release, I'm sure going through, PR people who are also employees of the church, maybe not the same PR people, but, it had to have gone through those channels. They put out a statement basically affirming that this event happened and saying that we have banned a fan from attending BYU events. Well, I was part of an organization called the Cougar Chronicle, and we got an insider tip that kind of cracked the whole case open. And it quickly became apparent that BYU was just saying these things to get on top of the problem, not because they actually believed it was true. And it turned out it wasn't true. And it wasn't like this was a harmless mistake, this had consequences, especially for the person who was the band fan that everybody from the New York Times to CNN was calling racist across the country for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see something like this happening, where we have very fuzzy allegations with a strong response from, church PR employees, that comes out, and then days pass where those allegations don't seem to have metastasized with more concrete facts, I get very, very nervous, especially because these type of things have consequences if you get them wrong. And if you've come out too strong, it's not a bloodless mistake.
Oh yeah.
So that's just my main concern right now. I'm actually not terribly interested in Ballard's guilt or innocence on both the using Elder Ballard's name charge and the sexual misconduct charge. My concern is a little more geared towards what is going on with this whole, we're going to respond in emails and have our name be anonymous, I don't know whose choice was that, to these tabloid news outlets that are anti-Mormon just because they asked us to, about one specific member, about the conversations he's had with, I don't know, probably not more than a couple dozen. That part just doesn't make sense. And it gives the impression that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is at the beck and call of whatever news organization wants to try and get their opinion that's going to support whatever story they're trying to put forward.
See, it's funny where I come from on this, and I've had to tell, like, everyone has to, people are like acting like I'm some Tim Ballard defender or something. Like I've actually been very skeptical of Tim Ballard, just because I'm skeptical of anyone who runs a nonprofit where they make a lot of money on it. In my mind, I'm just like, that just seems shady. Anyone who's out doing that, I'm not a fan. I'm sorry. And so I have a bias against Tim Ballard, right? But the reality is I'm also very sensitive to allegations, because we live in a world where allegations are thrown around all the time by shady news organizations. And then what happens is they often turn out to be false. And so my understanding right now is what we have against Tim Ballard are allegations. But the church didn't respond as though these were allegations. The church responded as though these were the gospel truth. And that not only that, no specifics have been given. And in fact, there are things that I'm really disturbed by. As I look at this, I'm going, hold on here a second. The church says that in the statement, it says the Church of Jesus Christ has never endorsed, supported, or represented OUR, or Operation Underground Railroad, Tim Ballard, or any projects associated with them. Okay, just so that we're clear, Tim Ballard is an author in the Deseret book website right now. Lots of books by him that are being sold by the church's publisher. In addition, Elder Ballard is on record on the church's website talking about Tim Ballard as his close friend. They had a story up on the church's website that was about Operation Underground Railroad in the faith promoting stories section. You could legally parse that out and say, well, we didn't technically endorse it or support or represent, because no financial money exchange. But it's what? And then I want to ask, well, when it says that he uses his name for his, for his own personal benefit. Okay. What do we mean by that? This is really vague. Did he, because there's here's one scenario. One scenario, he's in a meeting with a bunch of people and he says, and I'm actually close friends with Elder Ballard, and then blah, blah, blah goes on. You know what I mean? I'm a good member of my church. I'm even friends with Elder Ballard, yada, yada. Okay, is that claiming an endorsement in order for your financial gain? Now, on the other hand, if he went into some meeting and he said, me and Elder Ballard, we went in a room, we prayed together, and Jesus appeared to both of us, and he told me and Elder Ballard that, it's a secret thing between us, but you all need to donate money to my organization. Otherwise, the Lord will be upset with you. That's quite a different thing, right? So if the church in the exact statement is saying that they never supported, represented, or endorsed Tim Ballard in any way, when he's on their friggin' website, yeah. Well, what did Tim do? Where you got And did he ever get the breakup letter? Like, where was the breakup letter where you all said, hey, Tim, like, you're out of here. We have nothing to do with you. Do not mention our name. You've betrayed us. Like, you're talking about a betrayal. When did this betrayal happen?
Well, I have an unconfirmed report. So maybe people could go and check this. I'd be interested to see in the comments, or if I have time, I can look at this. But somebody said, hey, Elder Ballard actually spoke at Education Week. So this would have just been about a month ago. And he actually mentioned Tim Ballard by name while he was giving his talk. So when this report, comes out, the statement comes out of when Elder Ballard realized what was going on, it apparently made it look like several months ago. He immediately cut all ties with Tim and hasn't spoken to him since. But then he's speaking about him at Education Week, allegedly, from what this person told me they saw, or was it heard?
And saying that this relationship is in the past in the statement, and then it says for many months. I mean, this isn't that isn't very far in the past. And if he's saying I didn't even know about this, and if there's some great betrayal, like, and the reality,
and why not have made a statement then if it was so important for the church to make a statement about this versus now?
Well, now people said, well, he's going to run for Senate. And he might claim that the church endorses him. My whole thing is this: like, let's grant something. Let's grant for a moment that Tim Ballard did do the thing that was like the bad scenario. He did go to people and say, Elder Ballard endorses this, and if you don't, the Lord's going to be upset. He told me this. I'm endorsed by the church. Look at me on their website. If he really went that route, fine. Let's grant the benefit of the doubt. The church could have made a very different statement than this one. This one was incredibly sharp and personal, where they could have simply said, like, I even made up a fake one and I put it out there as kind of like this is what I would have said. If all of these allegations are true, this is the way you go about handling it. You say, the Church of Jesus Christ does not endorse Tim Ballard. It does not support his organization. Like, we are not affiliated with him, and anyone who represents otherwise, including Tim Ballard, is misrepresenting the church, and that's wrong. And then you could say something like, and there have been many other allegations about Tim Ballard, and we are going to evaluate these allegations and will take the necessary action through the proper priesthood channel as things may need to happen. Like, that's a perfectly acceptable statement that says, hey, if this endorsement has been made or an endorsement has been made, then, and we disassociate from that. But this was like, he's betrayed us.
Immoral.
This is immoral. And and we've never supported this guy. We've never endorsed him. Like, we don't have anything to do with him. And it's just like, what?
The common objection at this point from some people, which I understand partially, is, well, the church was on a time crunch. So they could have come out with these nice general conference talk level of rigorous scrutiny statement like the one that you suggested, but the time crunch was just so much, they had to get it out there. It was better they put something out than not put something out. I'm like, okay, even if we grant that they did need to respond to this.
I put together that statement in 5 minutes.
And at the Cougar Chronicle, they kind of tapped me to be the person who would write these things pretty quick, because I don't know if I actually am, but they seem to think I was good at doing it. It is not hard to put out something that you are still happy with 3 weeks later in an afternoon, like a paragraph. It's not that difficult, especially if you've been a PR expert for 15 years. So while I do want to give the church, and when I say the church, I mean like PR people at whatever floor in the church office building, not like the ordained 12 apostles and all that. I want to give them as much benefit as that as possible, but you're kind of really selling them short if you're saying that the entire PR team is somehow unable to produce a coherent and properly worded PR statement. Like, that's their job. And I know from experience, it's not that hard to do.
Or you just release another statement that simply says, just an FYI, Like, we want to clarify that, like, he's in good standing in the church. We don't endorse anything that he does. And, people should, we'll see to these allegations or something. I mean, it's like,
and yeah, because
right now they've
fair
created the biggest firestorm ever. Like, release another statement to put out the fire then. Clarify
well,
what's going
and that's
on.
the thing. When people are saying the church needed to respond to this, it's like, well, did you look at the headline for Vice News? The church's response was the story. They weren't even responding to the story at that point. Their response was the story. So I don't know if they thought that they were just going to be a little blurb, at one paragraph of this giant expose of Tim Ballard, and they just weren't aware how Vice was going to be releasing this stuff. But they were the headline. It's like Mormon Church denounces Tim Ballard.
Vice needs to get a promotion. Because you played that story like a friggin' wow. Like, you got the church to come out and condemn this guy, and you had the people that were the closest. Oh, you're
good. Okay, you're good.
You got the people that were the closest to Tim Ballard to totally denounce him, like, and you were able to write a story on that and release that. Yeah, like, I gotta admit. That's pretty good.
And I'm okay if the PR team's not infallible. Like, I felt like we've been played too sometimes at the Cougar Chronicle. Like, they won that one. Like, better luck next time. We'll learn from our mistakes. But I don't know how people at the church office building who worked on this could be like, yeah, I'm super happy with that. Like, they've got to at least be going, if I could go back in time.
Crazy over it. But I want to, my thing is this. So, and I'm not here to denigrate the brethren, but also I know that they're human beings and they have their own passions and things like that. The reality is this statement did not go out without approval from someone in the apostolic ranks. Okay. So as we look at this letter, there's another aspect of this that I think we need to take a look at. And that is, President Ballard's involvement in this. So a lot of questions have come up about, who approved this, right? So let me pull up the actual statement here. You'll notice that it talks about very personal things that only Elder Ballard would be able to comment on. Okay? Like the nature of their friendship, like how long it's been since President Ballard had been in contact with Tim, right? Like, I think there's no way that Elder Ballard wasn't involved in this to some extent if, in fact, Elder Ballard was, we're talking about things that only Elder Ballard would know. So my hypothesis, and this is just me hypothesizing, is that Elder Ballard is the one who, at least him, gave the stamp of approval to this. And I could see a scenario where there's other, apostles that are over PR. They're like, hey, we got this situation. Elder Ballard, we're going to let you handle this one, since ultimately you are, the one involved in this, and kind of, the nature of your relationship. Like, you kind of work with the PR guy in order to do it. Now, I've thought, and this is just a crazy hypothesis, Elder Ballard's getting very old, and maybe he saw this stuff and freaked out from Vice, and just kind of, here's the statement, and let's, get it out there. And maybe he didn't write it exactly, but the other guy that, the PR guy was involved, Doug was involved, and they kind of worked together to throw out this statement. But you brought up an interesting point about Doug and some of the things on his LinkedIn profile, and that you think that there might be something weird going on there. What are your thoughts on that?
We talked a little bit about this off air and decided to talk about it more on air. And this is all speculation, but it's possibly some good stuff. So here's the thing, Jacob, you seem to, at least before we started talking about this, be of the opinion that Elder Ballard is like, whoa, about this guy that his friend, and maybe his memory's not quite as good as it was before. And so he says, put this thing out, like, say these things. And the PR people were going, you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Let's do it. And then it goes out, and it's probably a little harsher than it should have been. I kind of have the opposite approach of the PR people coming to Elder Ballard and advising him I'm sure he gave the ultimate stamp of approval in some form or another, but I think it's possible that they were the ones advising him to take such a strong approach. And one of the supporting evidences for that is if you go and you look at the guy who sent the email, Doug Anderson, you go and you look at his LinkedIn profile, he only follows a handful of people on there. One of them is Bill Gates, and one of them is Justin Trudeau. There's not really a viable world where, at least politically, this guy is very anti-Tim Ballard, this Doug Anderson guy. He can love him as a child of God, but politically, I think he sees him as dangerous. If you're following Justin Trudeau.
Now, obviously, this is all kind of speculation, but if you have Justin Trudeau, Bill Gates, and some of the other people on his LinkedIn profile that people were saying, and he doesn't have like a lot of other people, but you're not a Tim Ballard. You're not in Tim Ballard's political camp. In fact, you're about as far away from Tim Ballard's political camp as you can get. So if we make the assumption, this is all speculation, that Doug Anderson potentially has a very strong bias against people like Tim Ballard, and now there's a chance that Tim Ballard is going to become his senator in the state of Utah to replace Mitt Romney. Doug Anderson maybe, and this is again speculation, is there not a possibility that Doug Anderson, if he has a strong political bias against him, that he plays a role some way in fashioning this statement?
Yeah, and so Nathaniel Givens, we keep bringing it up over and over again, and I apologize for that, on the Word Radio podcast brought up the good point, and I think it is a good point for the people that are trying to say this isn't actually a church statement. He said, look, the guy is hired as a person who makes statements for the church. What else would an email from him be other than a church statement? I say to that, fair enough. But if the only role of the PR person is to forward emails from the apostles that wrote the church statements, what is the purpose of the PR team in the first place? He had to have had a role in this. They have a role in all these things. The apostles aren't PR geniuses. They have a lot on their plate. I would not be surprised if he sat down with Elder Ballard for a 30-minute meeting. They came out with the 5 bullet points. Well, they decided to respond to it first. That's kind of the big decision. And then to decide what are the 5 things that are most important for us to get across. What are our talking points? He goes and writes that. Maybe sends it to Elder Ballard for one final read through before sending it off. But when he has that general structure of what he's going to write as a PR expert, he gets to make choices about specific words and specific phrases and the overall tone of the message. And that's where his kind of non-prophetic biases can start to play into it. Are we casting a lot of aspersions on this guy with not too much evidence? Yes. However, it is done to give Elder Ballard benefit of the doubt. Like I'm more inclined to give Elder Ballard benefit of the doubt in this than I am for some random PR guy that I didn't know about 5 days ago.
And who appears, at least, to potentially have a strong political bias that might exist against people like Tim Ballard.
Whether it played in or not, I don't know, but there is a motivation there.
Well, a potential. All this, guys, speculation. Well, this is just, we are trying to explore.
There's a motivation, but I don't know if he acted on that motivation. So I'm saying what you're saying, but I said it differently.
And my thing is as I look at this, I just go, we're all trying to make sense of this. We're trying to figure out what's happening. Is the church just being dishonest, or is Tim a total con man, bad guy, and he's lying about the church has been in contact with him for months, all that kind of stuff, right? But or is there something else going on? Is it a PR guy that's off the rails? Is it, what is the reality of what's going on here? And I think that, that's kind of what everyone's doing right now. And I don't think these are totally like off the rail possibilities, because I think you're right. I mean, I think the PR people are the ones who are the professionals at putting together these statements. And there is a possibility that Elder Ballard...
They do something during their 9 to 5s, Monday to Friday. They're not just forwarding emails from the apostles.
And if it isn't just a bullet point list, even if let's say, here's another scenario that I had run. And again, this is speculations. I don't want anybody to take this as what it is. But there's a possibility where maybe he did talk to, let's say, Elder Ballard's on assignment somewhere. And, they didn't meet and sit down together. He's talking to him on the phone. And he goes, hey, Elder Ballard, we have the situation. Here's the statement that I think we should release. And he tells him a statement that maybe is missing some of those key phrases, like morally unacceptable behavior and betrayal and, some of that stuff. Right. And so he ends up releasing the statement, and Elder Ballard's like, well, it's, pretty much this. I think that's what we talked about, or he's like, that seems a little stronger, but, no, he calls him up. Is that what I said? I thought that's what I said. Like, is that yeah, that's what you said, Elder Ballard. Like, that's what I read to you last night. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, that's a possibility. I don't think that's way outside of it. Maybe he said something like, in the statement itself. Let me just pull it up here. Let me just give it a quick example. Once it became clear that Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name, maybe it said something like, once it became clear that Tim Ballard had used President Ballard's name without authorization, you know what I mean? Like you could play games with it. So again, I don't want to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole. I'm just throwing out all these different options of possible things that could have happened, because this seems out of the ordinary. And so we're all looking for an explanation.
I like probably best case scenario where people come out of this the most unscathed. Well, when we were talking, you said one, and it's if everything's Tim Ballard's fault. That's kind of the cleanest, simplest way that this gets resolved.
As horrible as that sounds, that's what I'm rooting for. Like, I'm rooting for the fact that Tim Ballard is a total snake, total con man, and that the church had been talking with him for months about stopping this stuff. They found out he was going to run for Senate. And they said, look, we need to get out in front of this guy because we've been trying to stop him. He's a total loose cannon. Like, that in my mind is the best outcome of this thing. Right. And I hope that is, but that's where my bias is, you guys. It's not on Tim Ballard's side. Like, my bias is on that side. So,
and I think the unfortunate fact is that most likely the PR guy was a little too vicious. Maybe Elder Ballard's memory problems played into it. And additionally, Tim Ballard's not as good as people thought a couple months ago. Where it's kind of like everybody's a little wrong. And that's deeply unsatisfying, but it's possibly the most likely scenario right now.
Here's what I know that I think is indisputable, is that in the court of public opinion in the church, Tim Ballard has been pronounced guilty.
Yeah.
And my thing is I'm looking around going, okay, are we sure he's guilty?
Of what?
Yeah, like, what is he guilty of? And then now people are like, here's what everyone's attitude should be right now. The attitude should be, what the heck is going on? Like, what did Tim do? Like, either this response was merited or it was not. Those are the options. And now everyone in the church who has a quote unquote loyalty to the church, now they have to go to the side that they say it was merited. Of course it was merited. The church made the statement. I'm on the church's side. Therefore, it's like, whoa. What, but we don't know the facts yet. And they're like, well, the brethren must know it, and we just got to trust them. That's what Nathaniel Given said last night when I was on the interview with them, is you just got to trust the brethren on this.
Yeah.
And I do have some trust in the brethren, but I don't necessarily trust that they always get PR right. And I also know that people can lose their tempers and say things that they shouldn't. And I know that if it's in a time crunch and, there's a bunch of different scenarios here for how this could have played out. And there's also the scenario that they just plain made a mistake, that they were hasty and rushed to a judgment based on incomplete information. That can happen. Okay.
And I'm not saying I'm not saying Nathaniel's doing this, but if you take the position of no, they can't make mistakes, that's like the position of a lot of the antis out there. It's the only difference is you're saying no, they can't make mistakes and they haven't. And a lot of the antis are saying no, they can't make mistakes, but they have, which means it's not true.
Well, why are we?
I think they're and you've said this with a lot of your analogies. They're highly reliable, especially in their capacity as witnesses of Christ. But I think a lot of the church historians, this is kind of general consensus in the church, is we have a concept of Joseph Smith might have messed a couple things up, and Brigham Young probably definitely did mess a couple of things up, and that doesn't denigrate their prophetic or apostolic calling or keys. And so if it was true back then, it's true now. And honestly, in the big scheme of things, a PR statement is pretty tiny. I mean, we're all riled up about it right now, but this is pretty small. Like, it's okay. It's not going to affect my testimony if Elder Ballard got this dead wrong. And I don't think he got it dead wrong. I think it was just approached in a bad way.
My thing is, I don't know. See, this is what bugs me. Right now, nobody knows what's going on. Tim Ballard could be a total monster. This thing could be fully merited, and I just don't know. But the facts that I do know are very, very concerning. And therefore, the people who just jump immediately to one side or the other, it's like, why don't we all just wait, pump the brakes, and see what the heck is going on here, and see if additional facts come out that make things better or worse. But, you have... and like I said, I don't have some bias towards Tim. If I have a bias, it's towards the church. I go watch my channel, you guys. Like I'm very, very much, I give the benefit of the doubt to the church. In this case, the facts are just objectively, in my mind, I haven't seen evidence produced that justifies this response, especially if it's true that they never talked to Tim, because that's the thing that blows my mind more than anything. Let's say he's a total monster. Like, is the first person you tell Vice News, or is the first person you tell Tim? And you call him in and say, and now people are like, well, this isn't a worthiness issue. Regardless, if I have a problem with anybody, the best thing that we should do is talk to them, not go immediately to the national media without their knowledge and pronounce them guilty in the court of public opinion within the church.
Now, Nathaniel, or was it Nathan Givens, in your live stream last night, kind of brought up the alternative to that, where he was saying, look, I've been in some of these circles. He called them the Q15. I hadn't heard that term before, but the Q15. And I know how they operate. And I don't really see a viable world where he wasn't informed about this before.
Okay. And
granted, I'm just...
That's a full-blown, then Ballard is, Tim is lying. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I would be very surprised that if that was the case, that it didn't show up in the press release. Like, he's done this. Elder Ballard, we told him to stop and cut off his relation, and now we have to make this statement. Like, I feel like they would have put that in there because they want to cover their bases. Like, that's the whole point of this press release. And so if you've been talking to him and he knows you've been talking to him, I just think you'd put that in there. Now, of course, you could once again make the argument, well, they only had one day to do this, and somehow they're unable to put together a good statement out of this. It's possible. It's possible, but things are just getting too weird. I just want more info.
Yeah, you're doing mental gymnastics here. Like, the simplest explanation is that they didn't talk to him because there are all these reasons to think that they didn't. Now, I could be wrong. And that's why I'm saying we don't know what's going on, but what we do know, or what seems to be the case, is causing a lot of problems. Even Nathaniel, which is funny, is being very, very defensive of the church in this, even he had to say, I can't imagine that they hadn't talked to him, because he even realizes if the church didn't even talk to him and went to Vice News first, even for Nathaniel Givens, that's like, like, that does not look good. That's like, we don't like what? And so again, there's smoke here for us to be concerned about. And I find it absurd on both sides. People who are just like, Tim's done nothing wrong. He is a saint. He saves children. And it's just all above board. And then on the other side, I have the other people that are like, the church is infallible. No, they don't say that, but they're basically like, the brethren follow the prophet. And they just like walk around their house saying, follow the prophet. And like, there's no possibility that they mess this up. And Tim is guilty. He's a betrayer. He's immoral. And if you ask them, okay, what specifically did he do? They go, I don't know. I just trust the brethren. And it's like,
yeah.
Oh.
Well, and here's the thing talking about evidence, because we keep bringing Nathan up. Sorry if you're watching this, but Well, and he was making good points. Like they were the most thought through points that oppose my own that are
Yep,
out there.
I
So
agree.
one of them he had was the fact that the church, it seemed like they just provided clarification to Deseret News and Fox 13 that yes, that's what we told Vice. And then other than that, they haven't said anything. So he's like, if they felt like they got something wrong, I don't, like they wouldn't have done something by now. We'd expect some sort of follow-up from them. I was like, fair enough. However, in the BYU volleyball case, that didn't happen. The follow-up, the walk back was 2 weeks later in something that wasn't published at all. Like it was on their website and you had to go find it if you wanted to find it. And once again, church PR employees in this scenario, like there are some apples to apples going on here. But the thing about this evidence is if Tim has been lying to people about his association with Elder Ballard to the extent that the church needs to come out in a statement in a kind of unconventional way about it, those people that Tim lied to are going to be pissed right now. So there's a group of people that are going to be pissed about Tim lying to them. And then there's another group of John DeLynn, Salt Lake Tribune, Vice News, all these other people who are out looking for them to give them statements. There's no way that after, to my mind, about a week, if all these people exist, one of those news organizations finds at least one of those people and they join in their shared interest and publish some sort of denunciation of Tim Ballard. Every day that that doesn't happen starts to get more and more concerning for the narrative that's out there.
Well, and that's a great point. And I do see, this is why I'm sitting and telling everyone to sit and wait and watch. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but the issue is that no matter I see, but you have to throw out the hypotheticals of, okay, if this happened, does that justify the statement? Like, what is the scenario under which the statement is justified? The only one that I can think of is if they had been talking to him beforehand. That's the only one. If that's true, I can see where Nathaniel's coming from. So a couple things have to be true. Number one, Tim has to have been like legitimately misusing the church's name, not just like, hey, I'm friends with Elder Ballard here or there, because, you know, you guys do have him published on your website. So like, is he not allowed to talk about that? Like, are you not allowed to talk about the fact that like Elder Ballard blessed your kid? Like, I mean, to some extent, if you guys are literally out there doing these things for him, like, and he just makes true statements, I don't think that's a problem. You know what I mean? He has to say something that like, no, he endorses this, or he's behind it, or you know, there has to be some sort of a connection to an endorsement that's beyond just a rough implied endorsement. Because if that's the standard, oh, implied endorsement is enough, well, then the church has definitely endorsed Tim Ballard. Like, well, let's be honest here. You guys have him on your website, and you have him all over.
Has to go both ways.
So yeah, you can't have one standard for it. So he has to have engaged in egregious church connection with his organization, one. And then number two is that they have to have told him to stop. Because even if he had made an egregious thing, but they never mentioned it to him, there's the thing of like, why don't you go to Tim and be like, Tim, like, you need to stop this. Because like, if this is so egregious, like as bad as it is in the statement, it's like, and you guys never mentioned to him to stop doing that? Because like, I mean, it's like, this guy's been doing this awful, awful stuff. And the first thing I would ask his reporter, it's like, oh, really? He's been doing awful stuff. Well, you guys have talked to him about it, right? You guys told him to stop? Well, no, we're just telling you right now for the first time that it's really, really egregious. It's like, wait, that makes no sense. So those two things, if those two things are true, he's been making egregious statements and the church has been asking him to stop. I can see how you just say, we have a loose cannon here. He's about to run for Senate. We need to let everyone know, like, this is bad news bears. Stay away. Right. And we're not associated with
there is an option number 3 to me, or path number 2. And the path number 2 is if this second round of allegations was also included in the email that was sent to the church office building. Now, Vice says they published the whole statement that was given by the church to them. So that's the weak point of this theory that I have. But it's possible that the church became convinced not only that Elder Ballard had used the name, and maybe we'll talk about that privately to him, but number 2, became convinced that the second allegations of sexual misconduct were correct. and that's what motivated the statement.
Well, in my
That's
mind,
another possibility. The only problem is the statement seems to only deal explicitly with his association with Elder Ballard. So that theory kind of falls apart.
But here's the issue. Here's where that one does fall apart. I can't include it in my options, because even if he was engaged in sexual misconduct and using the name of the church, if he was murdering puppies,
you start with his stake president and bishop, not a statement to Vice News,
or even just to him. Just reach out and say, "Whoa, brother!"
But this would be assuming that
News dump all this information on us. They want a statement. What's going on? Like, help us understand what's happening here. But they're alleging in the statement, they don't even leave room for that. They said this was months ago. This was before the statement that we got the stuff from Vice News. He had betrayed us. Well, no. I don't know. Let's look at the statement.
No, it essentially said that. Yeah.
I'm just very curious here. I want to pull up the statement.
The wording just gets so tricky with stuff. Like that phrase, morally unacceptable behavior. Like, what is that? What is it?
So it says, for many months, President Ballard has had no contact with the founder, basically with Tim. Okay, and then so it was for many months he hasn't been in contact. But then the only statement that it says, once it became clear that Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name and personal advantage, and activity regarded as a morally unacceptable, President Ballard withdrew his association. So my question is, when did that happen? Did it happen at the moment that they showed them these articles? And in which case, what they're referring to is he's literally saying, yeah, 10 minutes ago, just before we wrote this statement, like President Ballard became aware. It became
like he deleted his number from his phone or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what, because I've been analyzing this statement, because the statement will tell you what's the church is thinking on this. And for many months, President Ballard hasn't been in contact with him. And then the next relevant fact is, once it became clear that Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship. Okay, so there's two possibilities.
They're kind of disconnected, possibly.
Yes,
and Jacob, this is exactly what happened with the BYU Duke volleyball thing. This is exactly what happened. You go and you read the statement, and people who just read it through once, it makes it look like BYU caught the guy that was yelling these racist things and banned him from all BYU activities. Then you read it closer, and it's like, oh no, we take these allegations seriously, and we have banned a fan. Okay, so we're not saying that but we know that when we say it that way, people are going to make that connection, and we're fine with that. So these little distinctions actually do make a difference.
Well, and
PR people are going to be smart enough to put them in there, no matter what time crunch they were on.
And so it says, for many months, President Ballard. So there's two options. Either President Ballard, it became clear, it says, to President Ballard that he had betrayed their friendship at some point. Question is, when was that? If that was many months ago, when he realized that, he never told Tim. The church never did anything to say, like,
they never took the articles down.
They didn't take articles down. They didn't do anything, even though he had betrayed their friendship and that they needed to distance themselves from him, and they realized that he was unauthorizedly using it. Or number two is that he just became aware of it when he looked at the articles that Vice put in his face and was like, we don't have time to call Tim. We're just going to release this statement right now to get in front of this thing. Like, one of those two options are true, and neither one looks good, because now here's the possibility. It was many months ago that he became aware, and they begun talking to Ballard, or to Tim, and Tim has been lying through his teeth through this whole thing, and the church is exonerated, and there's no issue there. Right. So again, there is that possibility, but that's why.
Although that possibility would have to include a lot of Tim Ballard's very close associates who participated with him in this relationship with Elder Ballard are all backing Tim up, to my knowledge. And so they all have to be in kind of a conspiracy, or were just kept in the dark about it somehow. So it is still a possibility to me. but it gets complicated by those other surrounding people that all seem to be cooperating with Tim.
You're right, and that's fine. Maybe they're all lying. Maybe they're all full of it. Whatever. My bigger issue is this: is that it doesn't look good. Anyone with half a brain is looking at this, going, this stuff isn't adding up. Somebody's lying here, and here's what I'm worried will happen. And I think it's actually probably the most likely outcome, unfortunately, and it really bothers me, is that the church isn't going to say anything, and everyone's going to say, "Just trust the brethren." They're going to say what Nathaniel said. They're going to say, I can't imagine that the church didn't contact him. The church must have contacted him, even though there's no record of that. The church has not claimed that they contacted him. Tim says that they did not. He must be a liar. I'm on the side of the church, and the church must have I'm just going to invent this off the top of my head. The church must have been in contact with him, even though the church has not claimed that.
I am actually so confident that your thesis is correct that I made a bet with my wife last night after listening to the Ward Radio live stream for a cookout milkshake that for 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks, the church will not make any more statement on this. I feel pretty confident about that.
Oh, you'll win that bet. I'm saying, my thing is, I don't think they'll ever say anything.
I figured if they don't do it in 2 weeks, they won't ever do it, but the bet needed to end at some point so I could get my shake. So 2 weeks is the time frame.
Good idea. One other thing is the political side of this and the way this has turned into, like, I get really bothered. And in fact, I'm currently working on a video that I'm going to release probably in a couple days on political tribalism, because it's very, very clear. Political, it isn't about what's true. It's about the fact that Tim is on the wrong political team. And I'm not on team, I'm not a MAGA guy, just so everybody knows. I'm not campaigning for Donald Trump in the primary here, everybody, just so you know. I have supported him in general elections in the past, and it was specifically because of the other options that were on the table. But there are factions in the church that are delighting over this, because they do not. They're happy because Tim Ballard was potentially going to become their senator. And to replace Mitt Romney with Tim Ballard was just like these people's worst friggin' nightmare. Okay. And so they are just like, salvation has come. Our political enemy has been taken down by Vice News. We're happy about this.
Well, and the church.
You're right. And then on the other hand, you have the people that are like, the kind of the progressive types that are, again, these people are looking through a political lens. I'm not looking at through a political lens, just so you guys all know. That are looking at this saying, Trump and his ilk, down with them. Obviously, they have that. And then there are people that are politically motivated that are on Tim's side that are like, Tim can do no wrong. He's part of the MAGA organization exposing all the child pedophiles. And, maybe the church is infiltrated with child pedophiles. And that's what this is really about. So you have these different political groups. And I'm just like, I'm sitting here going, just take the political lens out of it. Just the question is what's right and what's wrong? Is what happened here right, or is it wrong? That's all I care about. And I care about what's true. Is it true that he did these things? Because here's the thing. I don't even know if Tim has done anything. And I don't deny that he has. I genuinely don't know. And I don't know if the brethren have totally screwed up. Maybe they have been talking to him. I don't know. But the reality is that everyone is jumping on sides based on their political priorities rather than being good disciples of Jesus Christ and valuing the truth over all else.
Yeah. And that's the thing is I've been having to fight my bias because, gosh, I believed that BYU Duke volleyball story for a solid 36 hours until we got that message saying, hey, you need to look at this more. I'm on the inside. And so just kind of like that betrayal of the PR statement from church employees not being what I thought it was and turning out to have hurt, an individual who turned out to be mentally handicapped. Like, gosh. So that's where my bias is with that. And I'm trying to overcome that. But I think I'm thinking about this clearly enough that I'm correct in saying this was a bad move. It might not be as bad depending on what the actual facts are, but it's still a bad mood. And Tim's guilt or innocence is kind of a separate issue that I'm actually less concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, either the statement is justified or it wasn't. And that's the real question that I have, because this is a very, people say, oh, there's precedent for this. It's like, no, in every case they were talked to beforehand. Okay. Sam Young, John DeLynn, these people, before any statements were released, they had been told to knock it off by church.
And fair Latter-day Saints, who I like, put this out in kind of their Q&A that they put out about Tim Ballard's situation. They said, while this situation is unique, there is precedent for this, and they gave all the instances where this has happened in the past 10 years or so. You go and click through them. All of them are on the church newsroom, and all of them are pretty gentle. Like even the John DeLynn one, oh, he's still a child of God. This is about helping people. The disciplinary process is about helping them. This is why it's confidential. Like very conciliatory, explanatory. And I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. It's just the difference is so stark when you look at those compared to each other.
Well, looking at the statement specifically, and I want to analyze this a little bit more, because I don't think anyone has really dug in enough on the analytics of the statement. The big things they talk about is that for many months, President Ballard has had no contact with him. At some point, it became clear to Elder Ballard that Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship. That's in the statement. And he betrayed their statement through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name for Tim's personal advantage. But then it says, and activity regarded as morally unacceptable.
So the morally unacceptable activity is attached to misusing Elder Ballard's name.
No, it's not. It's detached. He's saying...
You think it's detached?
Oh, I think it is. Because he's saying... It's
been a while since I've taken these English classes.
Let me read it directly. I'll pull it up here on the screen here for everybody. So let's take a look here at it. It says, and let me zoom in so everyone can see it well. Hold on a moment. It says... Hold on, let me click here. It says, for many months, President Ballard has had no contact with the founder of Operation Underground Railroad. That's great. The nature of their relationship, yada, yada, that is not that important. All right. It's just about, that's the nature of their relationship. Once it became clear Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship. So this is the question mark of the time of when this happened. It says, so once it became clear that he betrayed their friendship through the unauthorized use of his name for his advantage and activity regarded as morally unacceptable, President Ballard withdrew his association.
People who are better with sentence structure can correct me if I'm wrong. I thought it was for these two reasons, blank and blank, rather than using Elder Ballard's name for this and separately for this.
See, I read, or maybe people can have that opinion. I think it sounds like there are two things. It is item one. So he withdrew his,
which is using Elder Ballard's name,
using his name, and this other thing, number two on the list, morally unacceptable behavior. Mm-hmm. And based on the news releases, morally unacceptable
those allegations now.
There are allegations of sexual misconduct, and in the church, especially amongst older members of the church, morally talking about things of a moral nature or things that are immoral almost inadvertently refer to things of a sexual nature. Now that's what you may be reading into it. But it seems clear to me that those are two separate things, at least in my reading of it. Maybe disagree. And then it says, just the statement, President Ballard never authorized his name or the name of the church to be used for Tim's personal or financial interests. Okay. So that's really the core of what was said that is in this. There were many months that they had no contact, but that sometime here in the last months, maybe 10 minutes before they wrote this, President Ballard, it became clear that Tim had betrayed their friendship. So when did that happen? In my mind, if I'm going to just kind of state what seems to me the most plausible, is that Vice came to the church. They dumped all this stuff on their desk. It included sexual allegations. It includes stuff that's going to come out in future days about talking to psychics. It's going to come out and talk about stuff about the sexual stuff. And then and Elder Ballard and or somebody in the church read this information and they took it and they said, we got to get in front of this. And they put together this statement at that moment and said, it has become clear to us now that he is anathema. He is someone who is, we don't want to have any association with him. Here's the statement. And we're not on his team, as it says in the statement. Also, in addition to all this, just so y'all know, we have never endorsed, supported, or represented Tim Ballard in any project or any projects associated with him, except for on our website where we talked about it as a faith promoting story, and also with his books that we sell in our Deseret bookstore. And it's just like, like I said, if you're going to apply the standard of you are not endorsing someone whose books you are selling or representing them, like, you're going to have a hard time saying that if he just says a statement like, I'm good friends with Elder Ballard in some speech, like, they've set up a high bar. I sure hope they talk to him beforehand. I hope this comes out that, look, this happened several months ago. They've been talking to him. They've been telling him to knock it off. Tim is a loose cannon. He's out there saying that the church endorses him. He's lying through his teeth about all this stuff. He's been engaged in sexual misconduct. Like, that would be the smoothest out.
Yeah. To just kind of everything's Tim's fault, I think would be the smoothest out.
Yeah. But
when you do stuff like this, maybe this could be kind of a closing thought from me, is that the church approaches, when you're talking about this political spectrum, the church does not, participate in that, but it doesn't live in it. It's in the world, but not of the world. And the fact of the matter is that the church has to be careful, and Elder Hollins talked about this. They are very deliberate with how they approach the progressive side of the church. They're very deliberate, they're very careful, because they want to maintain the church's standards while not unnecessarily ostracizing members that might otherwise stay. That's their goal with addressing that side. However, something like this situation does put people that are lean towards the other side in jeopardy. There are going to be people that become convinced, starting 5 days ago to a couple weeks from now, that the church is actually part of this big globalist, child trafficking, all those sort of conspiracy theories. And some of them might leave. And they're wrong to do so. However, because the way the church handled it now, they might have better reasons. They're still wrong. Let me make this perfectly clear. They're still wrong for leaving, but their reasons for doing so might be better because of how it was handled in this kind of ambiguous, very strong way through a weird channel of Vice News. And I just get concerned that maybe there's a lot of focus on, we don't want to ostracize the left too much, but not really that focus of, and we should probably try and do things to help people on the right that might stay to also stay.
See, and I hate that entire paradigm. There aren't people on the left, there aren't people on the right. What there is there's right, there's wrong, there's truth, there's falsehood, and Latter-day Saints don't pander to the political priorities of the people. What we do is we tell what's truth, what is true. We face it fearlessly, and we stop thinking in terms of left and right, and we start thinking in terms of right and wrong. Now, I get what you're saying. I'm not condemning you, and I know that we have to deal with some of these realities.
They're trying to appeal to the individuals, the individual children of God, who happen to, in their mind, put great importance on these left and right things.
And that's a fair point. I guess in closing, my thing though is any member of the church, like, just so everyone knows, I sustain the brethren. If the church totally messed this up, if Mitt Romney called Elder Ballard and told him that he wanted him to submarine Tim's campaign, which none of this happened, but if it happened, I would still sustain the church's quorum of the 12, despite those kinds of stupid mistakes that are made. Okay. So anyone who's out there who's like thinking of abandoning the church over this, you are following in the footsteps of the people who abandoned Joseph Smith when the Kirtland Safety Society failed. Okay? You're doing the same thing. You're saying, you guys should have known better. You hold them up in this standard of perfection that is unachievable. And I agree. I'm not a blind follower. Reliability actually matters. Like, if you're not reliable, I'm not going to follow you to help me to know the mind and will of God. But this is a public PR statement that potentially was a screw up, potentially is totally justified. I just don't know the facts. We don't know the facts. But you also, and so those who are like getting ready to leave the church over this, like, pump the freaking brakes. And then the other side who are like, the church has done no wrong. Like, the church couldn't have done anything wrong. It's like, you're the people who are like, after the safety society fails, you're like, let's invest more. It's like, you just, at some point you gotta be like, no guys, like, a mistake was made. Like, let's calm down here. So like, you have these extremes all over the place, and I just hope everyone avoids those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of,
and as hard as it is, and I wish it didn't have to be this way, but I guess we've just got to wait and see what happens. It's very annoying, but yeah.
Hopefully it all clears up and people don't overly freak out about it. I think it's worth us talking about these things to get some clarity and understand what's going on, but also not something worth people making a mountain out of a molehill and, losing their faith over.
Yeah.
It, so.
And this is the idea of, you start with simplicity, you move to complexity, and then you move to simplicity beyond the complexity. If this is people's first introduction to the inner workings of what might be the difference between the church office building versus the brethren, or an inspired statement versus a mistake, like, if this is kind of your first introduction to these sort of problems, vicissitudes, we can try and look towards that simplicity that's beyond complexity. This situation really has no bearing on whether we're children of God, whether Jesus is the Christ, whether we should keep our covenants or not, whether the gospel has been restored. All those things are not touched whatsoever by the situation in any way. You could probably even go down a list of all the lesser doctrines and practices that we have, and the situation doesn't touch them or affect them whatsoever. It's important level of any of those things.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Luke. It's been great.
Yeah.
And look forward to future conversations. Take care.
You too.
So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.